Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon to all of you. I just would like to start by thanking to the organizers of this forum, which addresses many challenges that we face today. Our panel is about the role of religion in politics and society, which covers a broad range of topics. Religion is an important topic today, as it was yesterday, and most probably it will be one of the most significant issues in the future as well. In the 1950s and 60s, many political scientists and sociologists argued that religion one day will fade away and secularism will be the dominant force and religion will not be influential on culture, society, politics, etc. Well, in some societies, that is true actually. Secularism has taken place and religion became more individual. But in some societies, religion is as forceful as it was yesterday. And probably in the future, as I said, in many countries, religion, religious communities, religious ideas, and religiously inspired projects are on the increase. So there is that, I think, challenge. On the one hand, there is secularism, which is redefining state-religion relations on the one hand, but also claims of people who have belief, like freedom of religion, religious liberty issues. So these are some of the issues that we will be talking today. And I am very pleased to host very good speakers who are experts in the fields of state-religion relations in different parts of the world. They have a lot of experience in doing research and also in writing. The first speaker, actually, just let me also tell you how we are going to proceed. Each speaker will have 15 minutes in total, but we will have 2 rounds. In the first round, we will be addressing main challenges, issues, problems, root causes of these crises. And in the second round, we will be looking at the solutions, what sort of projects we can initiate, what sort of proposals we can bring forward in order to resolve some of the challenges that we face in the 21st century. So the first round will be about 9-10 minutes. The second round will be 5 minutes. So let's start with Dr. François Bourgat. He is from French National Scientific Research Center. So he comes from France, and France is one of the countries where we have a very dynamic debate on religion and secularism, religion and state issues. Actually, religion is seen there as some sort of problem. Of course, now we need to maybe rethink whether religion is the problem itself or the perception of secularism the problem itself. Now, François Bourgat, you have got 10 minutes to identify those issues in your first round. Floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I noticed that you said 10 minutes to me, not 9, and I appreciate, but I'll be shorter on the second round. Religion and politics, there are so many angles, so many issues we could address. To be close to my topic, I chose to concentrate upon the situation which I know the best, which is the situation in France, but not all of it. When it comes to the relations between politics and religion in France, things are very different, whether you consider the relation of the ruling elite with Christianity, with Judaism, or with, last but not least, with Islam. And you probably know that we are moving in France into a phase of tension, like probably never before. So briefly, in my 9 minutes left, I will concentrate upon what I consider the root causes of this very specific tension of France with the Muslims and Islam. Root causes, I identified 3 types, 3 different types. The first one is not the most important. The third one, to my understanding, is the most important. The first one is a plain competition between dogmas, like it has always existed, and which is natural to a certain extent, okay? France looks at itself as a society where Christianity has been dominant, and there is a rivalry with a foreign dogma, which is gaining importance. But this is not the root cause of these tensions that we are experiencing. The second one is more interesting. It's more specific to France. It is the specificity of our homemade secularism, what we call laïcité. In France, there is a path in our history which is different of that of our neighbors, English or cousins in the United States. In France, during the French Revolution, at the end of 18th century, the revolutionaries had to get rid not only of the king and its absolute power, they had to get rid of those who helped legitimate the absolute power of the king. They were the church. So the French Revolution hit the church, not the religion, not the faith, but the church. And, you know, the borderline is not very clear. Am I against the church or against religion? Nevertheless, it ended in France with this idea that religion should no longer be legitimate in the public sphere. Okay? So now when you hear most of the anti-Islamic rhetoric, you didn't hear a rhetoric such as, oh, I don't like Islam. Get out of my way. I don't like Muslims. No, you hear, I don't like religions. Religions are not allowed to be in the public sphere. So you happen to be Muslim, but I don't want you to be in the public sphere. So the rhetoric, the anti-Islamic rhetoric in France takes as a pretext this specificity of the religion being illegitimate in the public sphere, which is very different of the situation in the US and in the UK, and which has had very clear consequences in the treatment of Muslims. In the US, you know, if you take a dollar bill, in God we trust. We're not allowed to say so inside the public sphere in France. When the British found themselves in front of a man with a beard, a turban, and he said, I want to be a policeman, the British, they say, yes. The French would say, no, because there is a symbol of your religious belonging. You're not allowed to be a civil servant. And you know the case of the hijab. Is a lady allowed to be in the public sphere if she wears? No, this is the French style. Now, immediately you can compare with the Canadians, especially in Montreal, when they had tensions with Muslims. What did they do? They said, we want Muslims to be in the heart of the symbolic system of Canada. So you, lady with the hijab, come on and be part of the mounted guards. Just like what they did in Australia when they wanted ladies to be rescuers wearing a burkini, this famous maillot de bain was invented by the Australians. This one we are chasing in France. So you see the major difference at this level. But this so-called French laïcité is not, in my understanding, the most important root cause of the tensions with Muslims. Absolutely not. The third dimension of France, it's colonial history. It's colonial history. Muslims are not in the front row, people with a different religion, with a different dogma. They are people who belong to societies upon which we have been in a situation of total hegemony. And they want to speak up. They want to raise their voice. This the society does not accept. So I would say, I don't know, I might be running out of time sometime early. I would say the root cause of the tensions between the Islamic religion and ruling elite or the society in France has nothing or has not much to do with religious affairs. It is an echo of decolonizing. And this I can demonstrate. You know, there is a tension. If a Muslim citizen says, I want my rights, we will blame him as an Islamist, a fundamentalist. But if he happens to be non-Muslim, coming from south of Sahara, if he's an African, black African non-Muslim, and he asks for his rights, we will have the same rhetoric of demonizing him. We will not say he's an Islamist, we say he's a racialist. He is a racialist. He wants to raise racial issues. So this is my frame of analysis. We will have time to go a little further. Just one point, that the red line that French government has moved beyond during the last 2 years. We used to demonize actions of a minority of Muslims. He who wants to do jihad, armed jihad. Now the French government has moved to a situation where he is no longer demonizing, criminalizing the actions of a minority. He is demonizing the opinions of a majority. And this is why we have reasons to be pessimistic nowadays in front of this situation in France. Thank you for your attention.
Well, thank you very much, Francois. You used your time quite effectively. And I think you have identified 3 major points as the root causes of the problems that we see: competing ideologies or dogmas, French-made laïcité, and this colonial history. But also, maybe one should add this idea of securitization of religion in general, and also securitization of Islam in particular, because the French view of Islam is not necessarily confined to what's going on within the country, and also it has, I think, repercussions with regard to freedom of religion, liberties. Maybe in the second session you may address this issue, how we can really, in the 21st century, the politics, the state can resolve these issues. Now we will move on to Professor Şaban Ali Düzgün, who is a lecturer at Ankara University, Faculty of Theology. Actually, he will be talking about how we understand religion today, what sort of approaches that we have, and whether those approaches can be source of conflict, can be source of problems. Because when you look at the literature on religion in general and on Islam in particular, there are different approaches, like the written religion on the one hand, but religion that is practiced on the other hand, but also religion that is on the move, changing all the time. How would you situate the main issues and challenges that the modern societies face with regard to understanding religion? The floor is yours. You've got 9-10 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The fact that our chairman started with English does not require me to continue in English. Doğru mu?
Yes.
Salonda ne kadar Türkçe konuşan var? Türkçe konuşmam gerekiyor. Çoğunluğa göre dil değiştiriyoruz. Bir fıkra ile başlamak istiyorum çünkü 2 gündür burada hiç fıkra anlatılmadı. Onu fark ettim. Fıkrayı Zagreb İslam Toplumu var. Hali hazırda çok etkin, çok güzel insanlardan oluşan bir topluluk. Zagreb, Hırvat Müslümanların oluşturduğu. Bir konuşma için Zagreb'teydim. Bir psikiyatrist anlattı bu fıkrayı. Muhteşem bir fıkra. Onu anlatacağım. Oradan sonuçlar çıkaracağız. Hoca, bu bizim Nasrettin Hoca da olabilir. Hoca her sabah evinin etrafını ekmek kırıntılarıyla çeviriyormuş. Döküyor. Komşusu sormuş, niye bunu yapıyorsun? Kaplanlar evimize saldırmasın diye yapıyorum demiş. İyi de bu bölgede kaplan yok ki demiş. O da gördün mü bak sonucunu hemen gördük demiş. Şimdi niye bunu anlattı psikiyatrist? Diyor ki bu sebeplerle sonuçları birbirine karıştıran paranoid zihin halidir. Sebeplerle sonuçları birbirine karıştırıyor. Şimdi din ile ilgili bugün konuştuğumuzda çok genel olarak gözlemlediğimiz hatanın da ötesinde, çünkü bir durum tespiti yapıyoruz ve ona göre çözüm arıyoruz. Durum tespiti içinde bulunduğumuz çağdaş durumun, modernitenin, aydınlanmanın bütünüyle din tarafından, dinin ürettiği sorunlar tarafından yaratıldığı. Dolayısıyla içinde bulunduğumuz modern durumu tespit ettiğimizde ya din karşı devrimci, yani her atılımın önünde bir karşı devrimci, ya Diderot gibi isimlerin önerdiği gibi geri kalmışlığın sebebi, yani üzerine her türlü suçun atılı olduğu bir mücrim, bir günahkar konumuna itiliyor. Din 400 yıldır modernitenin başlamasıyla beraber. Üstelik bugün bile biz dini muhafazakarlıkla birlikte anıyoruz. Mesela muhafazakar dediğiniz zaman dindar muhafazakardır. Şimdi şu soruyu hemen bu durumda ben soruyorum. Diyorum ki bir dinin, İslam özelinde düşünürseniz, Hazreti Peygamber özelinde düşünürseniz, inmesine sebep olan, nüzulüne sebep olan şartlar nelerdi? Köle düzeni diyelim, adaletsizlikler, haksızlıklar, aslında hukuksuzluk, yani modernitenin, aydınlanmanın çözüme kavuşturmak istediği sorunların tamamını aslında din de çözüme kavuşturmak üzere vahiy ile insanlığı birleştiriyordu. Burada o zaman sorun şu, nasıl oldu da din mesela kamusal alanda hiçbir şekilde görülmemesi gereken, tezahür etmemesi gereken bir fenomen olarak etiketlenmeye başlandı. Ama geldiğimiz nokta bizi şunu gösteriyor. Bu iyi bir soru. Ama geldiğimiz noktada benim de çabalarımdan bir tanesi o. Sabah Ebrahim Musa ile konuşuyorduk. Aynı şeyi söyledim, tekrar edeceğim. Jürgen Habermas bugün Almanya'da bütün gayreti, adamın geldiği neredeyse 100 yaşına gidiyor. Gayreti şu: kamusal alanda insanlar huzuru, saadeti, mutluluğu bulacaksa bu insan ister seküler insan olsun, ister dindar insan olsun kamusal alanda, o kamusal alanı hangi üst yapı, din üst yapılardan bir tanesi, benim üst kimliğim mesela, hangisi uygun bir tarzda inşa ediyorsa, bunu inşa edecek terimleri, kavramları varsa gelsin, buyursun, inşa etsin. Seküler de inşa etsin, dindar da inşa etsin. Onun için bizim kavramlarımızın, yani şunu söylemenin bir karşılığı yok arkadaşlar. Üst anlatı dediğimiz, mesela ırk. Irk gerçeği size nihayetinde ulus devleti kurduruyor. Irk dediğinizde, ki böyle bir gerçeklik var, ulus devlet, ırk gerçeğinin sizi götürdüğü bir nokta. Din diye bir üst anlatı var. Ümmet gerçeği sizi o noktadan alarak oraya götürüyor. Yani bazı kimlikler, üst anlatılar bizden bağımsız, benim ırkım benden bağımsız, ya ben onu seçmedim. Dinim de hakeza öyle, içine doğdum. Dolayısıyla bunu sonra değiştirirsiniz, değiştirmezsiniz ama içine doğduğunuz bir gerçeklik var. Dolayısıyla bu üst anlatı dediğimiz kurumları, ya bunlar uygun bir şekilde, uygun diyeceksiniz, uygunluk nedir? Uygunluk, Kur'an-ı Kerim'in belirleyici uygunluğu insan onurudur. Benim temel tespitim odur. İnsan onuru. Bu Müslümanın onuru, Hristiyanın onuru, Yahudinin onuru diye mikro atomize edilmeyen, mikro parçalara ayrılmayan bir üst kavramdan bahsediyoruz. Ona el-ismetü bil ademiyye denilmiş. Yani sadece insan olduğu için insanlar temel haklar ve özgürlüklerden yararlanma hakkına sahiptir. Dolayısıyla bu üst şemsiyeyi böylece, yani ırk dedik, ırk sizi ırkçılığa götürebilir ama insan onuru temelinde gittiğiniz zaman bütün insanların ayeti kerimedir. Her insanın renginin farklılığı, dilinin farklılığı Allah'ın varlığının kanıtı olarak bize sunulur. O zaman ırkçılık yaptığınız zaman bu kanıtların karartılması anlamına gelir. Yani Allah'ın varlığına kanıt olarak sunulan dilin farklılığı, ırkın farklılığını siz ırkçılık üzerinden eğer başka ırkları kötülemeye, dejenere etmeye başlarsanız bu sefer dinsel olarak o kanıtları karartan suçlular pozisyonuna düşersiniz. Bu birinci tespitim bu. Yani din denilince şöyle Latince'de bir ifade var. Corruptio optimi pessima diye. En kötü şey en iyinin bozulmasıdır. Şimdi din dediğimiz şey benim hafsalamda din Allah vallahu yed'u ila daris selam. Allah dünyayı barış ve esenlik yurduna çevirmenizi sizden ister. Şimdi bu çok üst bir amaç. Allah size dünyayı esenlik yurduna çevirmenizi ister. Ama ilginçtir, Kant ebedi barış üzerine denemeler kitabını yazarken, kısa bir deneme nihayetinde, kitap bile denmez yani. Onu yazarken diyor ki yani bir hancının duvarların üzerinde, bir hancının duvarına asılı bir mezarlığı gördü de adam esinlenmiş yazmaya. Demiş ki galiba ebedi barış ancak mezarlıkta olacak diye. Ya ebedi barış dünyada olacak mı? O kitabın yazılı sebebi o mezarlık resmini bir hancının duvarında görmesiymiş Kant'ın. Onun için diyor ki bir barış, mesela madde yazıyor, madde 1. Bir barış anlaşmasında bir sonraki savaşı tetikleyecek imalı bir cümle bulunduğunda o barış anlaşmasına barış anlaşması bir defa denemez diyor. Anlıyor ki yani bunu yazmasına rağmen bir pesimistlik, bir kötümserlik sinmiş Kant'ın da ruhuna. Bunu nasıl aşabiliriz? Ben adalet 2 gündür konuşuyoruz. Adaletin çok vurucu bir kavram olduğu söyleniyor.
Hocam,
ama
nasıl aşılırızı 2. bölüme bırakabilir miyiz?
Hemen bu cümlemi tamamlayayım. Gerisini açtığımızı oraya Talip Hocam getireceğim. Adaleti değil, tam tersi. Yıllardır konuşuyorum, altını çiziyorum. Merhametin, rahmetin, aynı dinden olmasalar da, aynı dili konuşmasalar da, aynı rengi taşımasalar da sanki aynı ananın rahminden, rahim ile rahmet, merhamet aynı kökten gelir. Aynı ananın rahminden çıkmış kardeşler düşüncesi yayılmadıkça, merhamet hakim olmadıkça adaletin iş göremeyeceği kanaati var bende. Bunu 2. turda inşallah daha genişletme imkanımız olur. Teşekkür ediyorum Talip Hocam. Sağ olun.
Well, we thank you for this interesting intervention, actually. You have also highlighted the dichotomy between narrative paradigm and the practice that we see in terms of religion all over the world. But I think that is also one of the products of modernity. When modernity, I think, has risen, there has been some, as you have just pointed out, very negative labeling of religion as the source of many evil stuff. Probably from here we can move on to Professor Mesud Ebano, who is at Oxford University, interested in development studies. Now we have got secular, religious, spiritual movements, organizations, etc. You are interested in development studies, but as Shaban Bey said, many negative things are attributed to religion. The poverty, underdevelopment, injustice, etc., even radicalism. When you look at secular organizations that are dominant today, what sort of picture do you see in terms of such challenges and crises? The floor is yours.
Thank you, Professor Talip, for making a good connection, because I think you have helped me narrow it.
By the way, I forgot to advertise this book. She has written many books, but I have got one. It's called Modern Islamic Authority and Social Change, Volume 1. So that is the promotion of your book.
Because it also covers AKP, like how Diyanat has evolved as an Islamic educational sort of establishment globally. So I'll address that hopefully in the second round if we get some time. But to focus, because before I focus on the international development institutions, the World Bank and the UN, those kind of institutions, and how they're shaped by a very secular discourse and what are the challenges that emerge out of it, I would like to sort of take just a minute to connect back to the French context and make this bigger point that with which we started, that to what extent secularism, the way the idea and modernity has been associated in the 20th century is feasible, because if when we look at the French case, where I was actually doing a lot of fieldwork this summer, I'm leading a research program right now, a 5-year program, looking at Islamic knowledge institutions in Europe, so France, Germany, Austria, UK. I'm looking at all 4. And I was also in France, and it's a classic example that a state which is claiming to be laicite, like a complete separation, ideally, of state and religion, is today so involved in defining what the mosque should be teaching, which is not a domain it should really be entering if it's still secularism. So, but it's so concerned about religion for all the reasons mentioned already. But as compared to all the European states, it's the most involved in actually trying to say this is the type of Islam you should be teaching, where it shouldn't be going. So all I'm saying is that it's the religion and politics even today remain very entwined even in the West, not just in the Muslim world. But just to take the point, I had proposed that I focus more on the international development institutions, because even yesterday and today, the issue of, it's the new world order being, as it is evolving, and the role of global institutions. It was mentioned also in the opening speech yesterday, and President Erdogan also keeps referring to the beyond the power of the 5, the Security Council and the way in the UN it's dominated by the European institutions. So the problem, sitting in Development Studies Department, the problems that we realize is that these institutions generally are not working. It's not just a Muslim society or the Eastern side which doesn't have enough voice in these institutions that are complaining, but research is showing, independent research in our institutions, that these problems are flawed on 3 major grounds. And I'll mention them briefly before linking up explicit to the whole debate on religion. Is this that, first of all, yes, it's the politics that the Western, the colonial power, they created these institutions when at the end of, when colonization came to an end, and indirectly they control the world today through these institutions still, because they have the unproportionately strong voting rights on the decisions made by whether it's the World Bank, IMF, UN institutions, Security Council, all involved. But that's the point we all know. Second issue that we have with it is that there's a lot of research that the aid through which they exercise a lot of power in developing countries. And remember, a lot of Muslim countries fall within developing countries. So whether it's Pakistan, whether it's Egypt, what should be the future of gender rights, what should be the education taught, is very influenced by these Western institutions. And they define what development is. And they do it because apparently they give you aid. But the problem is that we know that the aid is very dysfunctional, and the power they exercise on the policies is much higher than the actual amount of aid they give. And also this aid has a lot of problem, a lot of money stays actually in the West, in consultancies and all these forms. So again, even at the efficiency level, there's a lot of problem. But despite that, these institutions are defining policies and future of these societies, a lot of them being Muslim societies. So here, this is the third point I want to raise as a problem, the main one for this panel, which is this, that there's a third concern we have when we teach development today, is this, that what is development is an idea. It's an idea about where the society should be going. What's the future? What is good life? That is what these development institutions are all about. And the fact that they are controlled, this discourse is controlled by Western so-called secular institution, means that they then define for the entire global community what is good life. Do you understand? So it's whether it's in terms of gender rights, should women prioritize motherhood or be in the economy? Should homosexuality be, like gay marriages, be allowed or not allowed? I mean, all these things are decided in the West, which are culturally, religiously partly informed choices that a society should have a right to choose on. But these institutions, because they come with a bit of aid, but they exercise disproportionately higher power than the aid money they bring, they influence the future. Because I lead multiple kind of programs, I've just completed another research study, which is looking at primary and secondary education in developing countries. A lot of Muslim countries, Indonesia, Pakistan, Nigeria, which is northern Nigeria, which is very Muslim. And again, the same concern. Communities want much more Islamic moral values involved in education in primary and secondary schools. But the ministries of education, which are very influenced by UN agencies and the World Bank policies, they don't want moral education. In fact, they want very Western kind of moral values imposed in there. So all I'm trying to raise is that the way if we are talking about, especially in a panel like this, about future of the world order and that new development, global institutions have to be developed, I think my proposal, and if you get the time, then I want to come back to it, is this, that we need the Muslim world, and also other Asian powers, whether it's China and all, which have different cultural traditions, they need to build a counter voice. And and for that, you really need a very strong, rigorous research institution funded by multiple like Muslim countries, but which has a very rigorous research base, not like the OICs and all we have, where the research and all agenda is very weak. Because the main thing I want to clarify is that if the UN and all these institutions exercise a lot of power, it's partly because they claim we have the best of research. So they go to Ministry of Pakistan in Pakistan Pakistan, they go to Ministry of, even in Turkey, if they come with any development gender program, they'll say, oh, this is our research. Harvard professors had done it. We funded it and Harvard professors did it. But the problem is, just to give you one specific example, on gender, who is to say that the Western women today is happier than the Muslim women? There's no, frankly, objective research available. Partly because all the research is funded by the World Bank and all. They go and study Muslim society specific cases, go back and say, oh, Muslim women are all deprived. While the thing is that the Muslim world doesn't have that power to go and do research on women in the Western world. Only then you can say which is the most optimal model. So my suggestion is that the Muslim world really needs an important research institution, which doesn't need too much money. It just needs much more thinking. Online research is available. You have a lot of bright young youth. I go across the Muslim world today, and especially second, third generation Muslims in Europe. You can draw on them and come up with very lean, financially not very heavy, but a very strong research institute which can produce a counter discourse which is religiously, morally ingrained and gives you a better vision of development, also a more sustainable vision of development. Because apart from everything else, we know that this Western modern of maternity and with very high consumption is not sustainable environmentally now as well. So we need that moral discourse brought in. And I think Muslim societies, and especially Turkey, if you get the time, I'll come back to my research, can be a good base to host an institution like that.
Well, thank you very much. I think you have highlighted a number of major issues, I would say, like the definition and meaning of development, whether aid comes with a cost, especially for people who are receiving it, and also, of course, also the discourse and counter-discourses. Maybe in the second round you can highlight some of those issues, because the current and dominant institutions are like the UN, WTO, and World Bank. What would be the alternatives? Maybe in the second session, second round, you can also highlight some of those issues. Now we go to the Professor Bünyamin Bezci. He is a professor at Sakarya University and also the director of Diaspora Research Center. I have been following his writings for many years, and he is one of the well-known experts in Turkey on post-secular issues, actually. It's been mentioned by, I think, Şaban Hoca, that Habermas has coined this term. Now, I just would like to ask Bünyamin Bezci whether there is a new state-religion relations in the post-secular age. What are the main challenges that we face, and what are the main issues that we need to address in post-secular environment? The floor is yours, Professor.
Çok teşekkür ediyorum hocam. Tabii ben de sunumumu Türkçe yapacağım. Şimdi tabii 10 dakikada mümkün olduğu kadar düşündüklerimi başlık olarak ifade edeceğim. Sonra o başlıkları biraz açabilirim. Tabii modern dünyada, ben bir siyaset bilimciyim tabii. Yani dinden daha çok aslında siyaset üzerine düşünüyorum. Ama din de sonuçta siyasetle ilişkili bir yerde duruyor. Şimdi modern dünyanın siyasi olarak siyaset-din ilişkisinin kurulmasına baktığımızda gördüğümüz şey şu. Aslında 3 temel tartışma üzerine oturuyor. Bir tanesi daha eski Roma'dan gelen daha hukuksal olan alan tartışması. Yani dünyevi ya da uhrevi alan mı olacak tartışması üzerine kurulu. Mesela bu alan bizde aslında yani bizim zihin dünyamızda çok da karşılığı olmuyor maalesef. Çünkü bizde mübaha alanı çok daha geniş. Alansal değil, daha çok olaysal kavruyoruz biz dini. Yani dini olan şeyi. Hatta Katolisizmden bakarsak İslam bayağı da seküler bir dinmiş gibi görünüyor. Bir başka tartışma noktası öncelik tartışması. Yani papa mı olacak, kral mı olacak tartışması. Bu aynı zamanda egemenlik tartışması. Bizde bu daha çok dini devlet şeklinde yapılanmış. Yani papa ve kral tartışması da aslında bizde çok böyle elzem bir tartışma değil. Bu anlamda baktığımızda aslında dini olanı kim tanzim ediyor, kim en son karar veriyor tartışması bu. Bir başka tartışmada Anglo-Sakson dünyanın aslında laikliğinin ya da sekülerliğinin kurulduğu mezhep kavgası üzerine kurulan, yani herkesin dini kendine ifadesiyle ifade edilebilecek bu dinin aslında bir barış ilkesi olarak, Protestan dünyada bir barış ilkesi olarak kurulması söz konusu. Bu taraftan baktığımız zaman aslında din seçeneklerden bir seçenek haline geliyor. Daha kültüralist bir bağlama doğru dönüşüyor. Modern dünya aslında temelde bu üç farklı bağlam üzerinde oturuyor. Farklı farklı ülkelerde bunların farklı tonlarını bir şekilde görüyoruz. Türkiye'de de aslında bunların başka tonlarını farklı bağlamlarda görüyoruz. Ama bu süreç içinde gördüğümüz şey şu bence. Dinde de bir şekilde aslında değişim oldu, siyasette de değişim oldu. Dinde değişim derken ana başlıkları şöyle görüyorum ben. Yani mesela dini aslında üç temel bağlama ayırarak düşünebiliriz. Ahlak, ibadet ve inanç. Şimdi ahlak konusunda sıkça aslında sekülerleşmeden bahsediliyor. İşte hatta dindarların ahlaksızlığı, hatta dindarca ve seküler yaşamın birlikteliğinden sıkça bahsediliyor. Dinin kültürelleşmesi de bu konuya çok dahil. İbadet konusu, sekülerlik konusunda sıkça ele alınıyor. Yani ibadetlerin aksaması, zayıflaması, gündelik hayatın bir şekilde artık dinin gündelik hayatın çıpası olmaktan çıkması konusu da sıkça gündeme getiriliyor. Ama inanç konusu daha ilginçtir. Çünkü inanç bir nevi ölüme karşı bir umutla alakalı bir şeydir. Yani kapitalizm o umutun, yani dinin yarattığı umudun yerine konforu koymaya çalıştı. O konuda ne kadar başarılı oldu, başarısız da olduğunu söyleyemez. Bir taraftan da dinin tabii ki bir cihan şumul olmaktan çıkarılması ya da evrensel olmaktan çıkarılması hangi dine göre değişir. Dinin tarihselleşmesi ve yerelleşmesi söz konusu bu bağlamda. Siyaset de değişti. Siyaset ne değişti? Özellikle 70'li yıllarda kurulan neoliberal siyaset dediğimiz daha çok piyasanın ve toplumun egemen olduğu ve biraz daha demokratik olan belki siyaset anlayışı krizlerin artmasıyla birlikte, özellikle 2008 krizi, pandemi krizi ve diğer krizlerin artmasıyla birlikte genel olarak aslında devlet ağırlıklı bir bağlama dönüştü. Tabii bu devlet ağırlıklı bağlam demek ekonomi ve toplumun üzerinde, hadi siz deyin ki dinin üzerinde de siyasetin aslında devletin giderek aslında artan bir hakimiyeti demek. Ama bir taraftan da teknoloji neredeyse devleti de, toplumu da, siyaseti de, ekonomiyi de bir şekilde aşan bir bağlama doğru oturdu. Tabii bu bağlamda baktığımız zaman yani postseküler çağ dediğimiz daha çok 2000'lerden sonraki dönemde gördüğümüz şey şuydu. Bu genelde literatürde işte dinin geri dönüşünden sonraki tartışmadır. Ve aslında bu değişmelerde çok denk düşüyor. Dindeki değişmeleri ve siyasetteki değişmelere çok denk düşüyor. Şimdi bu siyasetteki değişmelerde aslına baktığımız zaman birincisi daha neoliberal döneme özgü iki bağlam oluştu postseküler bağlamda din siyaseti ilişkisinde. Evet, bir tanesi Habermas, çok önemli gerçekten, kıta Avrupası tarzı bir siyaset oluştu. Kıta Avrupa'sında aslında öncelik ve alan tartışmaları birçok açıdan aşıldı. Dinin kamusal müzakereye dahil olması söz konusu oldu. Ama bir taraftan da din aslında rasyonel süzgeçlere tabi tutuldu. Yani bir şekilde o rasyonel süzgeçten geçmeyen dini öğelerde aslında müzakerenin dışında bırakıldı. Bu anlamda baktığımız zaman evet, din kültür olarak geri geldiği kabul ediliyor. Ama bir taraftan da dinin geri gelmesiyle birlikte, müzakereye dahil olmasıyla birlikte aslında istenen şey o rasyonel müzakere süzgecinden dinin geçebildiği kadarıyla geçmesi. Yoksa dinin bütünselliği içinde bir şekilde yer alması değil. Mesela bunu test edeceğimiz bir temel bağlam aslında sünnet tartışması. Onu açmayacağım. Ama Almanya'da özellikle sünnet tartışması çok önemli bir yerde duruyor. Diğer taraftan baktığımızda Anglo-Sakson konsept var. Anglo-Sakson konsept, hadi ona Taylor vari diyelim. Aslında inanç olarak yani dinin hala bir umut kaynağı olduğunu kabul ediyor. Ama din bireysel bir bagaj olarak görüyor dini. Aynı zamanda din tarihsel ve yerel, kesinlikle evrensel değil. Cihan şumul hiç değil. Zaten dinin kapsayıcılığı ve cihan şumullüğü patolojik bir iddia olarak görülüyor. Bu anlamıyla aslında saygı duyulması gereken bir seçenek olarak görülüyor din bu açıdan. Her iki bağlamı da aslında endişeli bir özgürlükçülük olarak görebiliriz. Dinle kurdukları ilişki anlamında. Bir başka önemli bağlamda, belki bu da özellikle devletin giderek güçlenmesiyle karşımıza çıktığını düşünüyorum. Daha çok politik teolojik konsept dediğimiz konsept. Hani bizde bu dini devletin geri dönmüşü olarak da okunabilir aslında. Ama bu tam böyle şey değil. tam da dinsel bir şey değil aslında. Dini kollayan bir siyaset ama siyaseti güçlendiren bir din aslında tasarlanıyor. Yani son söz ama siyasetin, yani din ama kimliğin bileşeni bir taraftan. Yani bu Amerika'da sivil din olarak karşımıza çıkıyor. Avrupa'da bazı Katolik ülkelerde Katolisizm olarak, mesela Polonya'da olduğu gibi Katolisizm olarak karşımıza çıkıyor. Ama bu çok da köklerden bahsetse de köklere atıf yapmayan bir düşünce. Daha çok geleceğe dönük, daha böyle güneşe dönük, ilerlemeci, çiçek odaklı, kök odaklı değil aslında. Böyle bir düşünce tarzı olduğunu düşünüyorum. Teknolojiyle barışık, piyasayla barışık. Yani bir anlamda yeniden gençleşme sürecini, romantiklerde olduğu gibi yeniden gençleşme sürecini içeren, dirilişçi, özgüvenli, aslında seküler bir dindarlık olarak karşımızda duruyor. Evet, kendini çok tanımasa da aslında düşmanını tanıyan bir yapı, bu politik teolojik konsept. Yani bunu artık Trump'ta da görebiliyoruz, bunu diyelim ki başka diğer bağlamlarda da görebiliyoruz diye düşünüyorum. Bu da aslında devletin giderek güçlendiği bir toplumda, postseküler toplumda yine dinin konumlarından bir tanesi olarak karşımıza çıkıyor. Şimdilik hocam bu kadarıyla yetineyim, sonra biraz açarım.
Thank you very much. I think Bünyamin Hoca raised some fundamental questions with regard to what religion became in the post-secular age. When state became so powerful, religion has been defined by this powerful, I think, institution. And he talked about secular religiosity, which is quite an interesting concept. Maybe we can come back to that later on. I think that also confirms, to some extent, the claim of many sociologists today. Even the states and societies like United States of America, which was seen as an exception to the secularization theory, this society is also becoming secularized in many ways. In the past, United States of America was described as an exception to the secularization theory. But today, when you look at the actual surveys, there is a lot of secularization going on in that country. Now I think we can move on to Kemaluddin Muhammad Nasir from Nanyang Technical University. He has also some work on post-secular issues, but also he is looking at this binary opposition between secular and religion, state and society. So he will be highlighting some of the main issues that we face today with regard to the impact of state on religion and vice versa. I think he has also slides. Do we have slides? Are you going to present something on? I don't know what it is. If our technical staff can help us? Okay. If not, you can. Yeah, it's there. Okay. Okay, you've got 10 minutes. Okay.
Okay. So I'm sorry if I've broken with tradition by introducing PowerPoint slides here, but I intend to be quite readish in my presentation. I'm sorry about that because I don't want to miss any important points that I want to bring forth. But what I'm missing in terms of charisma, I promise to make up for it in terms of PowerPoint slides, inshallah. So, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. So, I will be speaking simultaneously as a sociologist and an academic. I will be sharing both personal observations as well as commentaries by other scholars about the state of affairs in the world regarding religion in politics and society. Since this is a panel on the role of religion in politics and society, I think that sociologically we need to locate religion. What is the role of religion? Sociologically, I think that firstly, at the individual level, it gives meaning and purpose to one's life and even promotes physical and psychological well-being, as studies have shown this. And secondly, it motivates people to work for positive social change. Right? Religion promotes the development and even transformation of society as a whole. Of course, it can be used for the opposite kind of function, but this is generally what can happen, right, if we use religion positively. Thirdly, as an agent of social control of behavior, religion reinforces social unity and stability. Lastly, as a culmination of the previous 2 points, religion performs a key function of providing social solidarity in society, right? It is a huge So many of my works have taken Muslim societies as inspiration. While being a Muslim, studying Muslim societies may seem like a matter of convenience, right? It is veritably challenging to ensure that I draw not only accurate conclusions but academically sound ones. So in this slide, I will be sharing some of the paradigm shifts that I had to make, which I believe would be useful for anyone seeking to understand Muslim societies, to find resolutions to issues facing the community in their respective settings. Right, so the first one would be to always question notions that are taken for granted. Right, so I find that the problems with understanding Muslim societies today are also the problems of knowledge production, the problems of producing works on Islam and producing works on Muslim societies.
Kemaluddin, we have got translators here, interpreters. If you speak a little bit slower, it will be helpful.
Okay, I understand. Okay, so the first would be to ask the questions that are often taken for granted. So this stance is true of academia, whereby being in the knowledge industry, we intentionally question assumptions, beliefs, practices, and causes of resistance that many assume to be commonsensical and just the way things are. So we've heard about the power of the state a lot, like over the last 2 days, because this is also a conference on politics. But the second kind of shift that I feel politicians and scholars sitting in the ivory tower in the universities can perhaps do better, that is to resist the temptation to attribute everything to the state, right? Every single factor to the state, and to some, as may call it yesterday, high politics, right? So much of my work, for example, is about decentering the state, right, from being the be-all and end-all in discussions. So should we do so? If we continue to attribute everything to the state, I feel that we lose sight of the pulse of society and risk being out of touch with the ground, right? And I recall since the beginning of my academic career that my key motivation for doing so is that we want to project the future of Muslims. We need to chart and analyze the state of the youth, right? So I think that the youth has not been talked about often enough over the last couple of days. I'm glad that Masuda just now talked about the youth a little bit. If we want to understand Islam or Muslim societies 10, 20 years from now, we need to understand the youth of today. Right? So therefore, I urge everyone with an interest in societal transformation, be it politicians, civil servants, activists, NGOs, etc., to intentionally engage the youth in their endeavors. So just a little anecdote. One of the most memorable things that I've experienced in this conference thus far is being to engage with the young AK party members who are not just Turkish, but I was amazed that there are young AK party members who are of Iraqi background, Egyptian, Kazakh, Syrian backgrounds. I think that this is a wealth of diversity that the party has that I think that if you are not already doing, you will do well to engage them. Their ideas and insightful thoughts that they articulate to me excites me, right? So the last paradigm shift that I'm proposing is debunking this whole idea of Muslim exceptionalism, right? At times, there is a tendency to think about what is happening to Muslims, for example, solely from the vantage point of our own community. Of course, there are aspects of the ritual, for example, in terms of ibadah, that are particular to Muslims, right? In terms of prayer, salat, in terms of salat and fasting and so on. However, when we take the global issues that we face today and pare down the transformative effects of technology and the humanitarian ramifications of, for example, we've heard this over the last few days, forced mass migrations, for example, we will most likely find that they affect any society the same way. So in heading the conclusive calls that we heard yesterday regarding the need for a new global architecture, particularly one that applies humanitarian policy and diplomacy, we must steer from any notion of Muslim exceptionalism. So the intricate link between religion and politics cannot be clear. So I have thought about this issue of post-secular societies quite a lot in the works that I've done, but sometimes I feel that I've been a little bit mistaken in my own analysis. For example, if you look at many countries that are governed by a secular approach and a constitution that allows for religious freedom. However, what does the data tell us? For example, according to a report by Pew Research Center, more than 80 countries either endorse an official religion or privilege one or a few religious denominations over other groups, right, today. Right? And we are talking about post-secularism all the time, right? So of the countries that declare an official religion, Islam is the state religion for about 2/3 of them. in countries that have a preferred religion rather than official one, Christianity is often the favored religion in places mainly situated in Europe and the Americas. So when they say this is a preferred religion, besides legal status, these endorsements and recognition come with benefits such as state funding for religious education, the development of sacred sites, salaries for the clergies that are bestowed upon religious groups. So religion is always at the background whenever we talk about countries and international relations. So given these studies, we will be missing the point to assume that secularization means unfettered neutrality of the state towards religion. So we are not exactly living in a post-secular age, I think. Modern societies are typically multicultural, multi-ethnic, and multi-faith. So when the diversity of religions in society begins to disrupt civil harmony, states would intervene either directly or indirectly to regulate religious affairs. So this has always been the case. So what differentiates the plight of one religious community over another is how the political sphere makes sense of the role that religion plays in society, whether it is viewed as a source of solidarity or a cause of aspersions. So the character of the state comes to play. The management of religion takes on many forms in different countries, as a lot of works have shown. Right? Is my time up? 3 more minutes, okay. 2 more minutes, okay. So, firstly, it might seem counterintuitive, right, for us to say this, for me to say this, but I propose that we go beyond the vantage point of religion, even when we try to unpack the challenges that plague religious communities today. I like an article that was published in 2013 by Jeff Tan in the journal Sociology of Islam, whereby he asked the question, culture or class? Why Islam is neither the question nor the answer. Right? So basically, if we ask the wrong question, we just look within Islam, for example, and we look at the wrong places, not only are we going to get the wrong answers, but we are mostly also going to end up confirming our biases and our prejudices. So, for example, even my studies have shown that we always need to look at other factors such as demography to understand attitudes towards a wide range of issues. So this book that I did, like for example, looks at issues from demography, population, migration, xenophobia, and so on. So by understanding the socio-political landscape of any particular country, you can better understand the religious kind of like sentiments of the people. So I will end here, right? For example, we need to shift, I feel, from looking at things in terms of just countries, right? Nationally based approaches, right? So the interconnected world that we live in and the resultant network society necessitates that we take a global approach towards understanding social realities and move away from nationality-based ones. So, for example, we are seeing a young generation of Muslims who I sometimes call the September 11 generation, who has not come to know anything other than intense securitization and a questioning of their own identity. And this is evident both in Muslim minority as well as Muslim majority countries. I think we can continue this discussion.
Okay, thank you very much, Kemaluddin. I think the Heba can start from exactly where Kemaluddin left. Professor Heba Raufizet is at the Ibn Khaldun University in the Department of Civilizational Studies. Heba, as Kemaluddin said, we should give up national approaches because we are living in a globalized world, so we should adopt a different approach. But I think globalization comes not only with some positive things, but also with negative things. You know, it was expected that globalization would have brought some sort of heaven to the world. You know, cross-cultural breedings would have happened. But still, we see the huge divide between North and South, rich and poor, I think. Therefore, maybe you may address some of the main challenges that globalization has brought to the religion in particular and Muslim societies, religion in general and Muslim societies in particular. How we can really live in a globalized world as religious people. What are the main challenges and how we can overcome? The overcoming issue may be in the second round, but in the first round, maybe you can just identify the main issues.
Okay, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. I'm very happy for the invitation, and I'm very honored to be with all the participants. Of course, Masouda Hanim, Hoja, speaks very quickly. So she doubled her time, actually, by the speed. I will build on different points. I'm lucky because I'm the one who speaks at the end. But I actually, usually when I think about a topic, it fits into my agenda at that very specific moment. Yani I think from the perspective of what I have been considering in terms of theoretical research or public issues that I'm thinking of. And I've been thinking yesterday about the verse of Hazrat Ibrahim sallallahu alayhi salam when he said in the Quran, "Rabbi ij'al hadha al-balada aminan." May Allah secure this city, Mecca. وَاجْنُبْنِي وَبَنِيَ أَن نَعْبُدَ الْأَصْنَامِ. And don't allow me and my descendants to worship idols. And this was Ibrahim who was saying so, you know. And then he continued to say they misguided so many people. Okay, so إنهن أضللن كثيرا من الناس. And he was describing the power of paganism, basically. And this is something that I think we should bring along with us in the discussion. It's like how we define paganism vis-a-vis the religion. For example, in my case, the religion of Islam, for example, you know. So it's about sovereignty. It's about the power. Who is the sovereign, basically? And that it's not easy, actually. Monotheism is not easy. Or trying to focus on your choice of the deen or your choice of the worship is not easy. There are so many temptations, and again, paganism is quite strong. It has a grip, and it takes different shapes across time and history, up to the capitalist modern sort of market or politics or others. What paganism actually introduces is polytheism, that you have different gods. And then if you want to translate that to different histories, you can talk about having an authority in different spheres. So every sphere has got its own authority. You can have your own religion, but when you step out of your home, then the sovereign of the political realm has his own say about what you should be doing and how you should be behaving, etc. And then the other thing is considering humans to be part of nature. So basically, post-anthropocentrism. You know, it's interesting that what we started with in human history, we're ending with, but in different shapes. I think that secularism is not only about religion, but it's also about orders. And hence, how religion definitely can be an opium, but it also can be very liberating. And between religion as portrayed as an opium of peoples and it inspiring revolutions, we have different historical experiences, etc. The challenge that we are facing, based on the mention of post-secularism or a post-secular age, post-secularism basically does not mean that, it meant in Western literature that we are moving towards more secularism, but that is more inclusive of other faith practices, etc. But the overarching paradigm is basically secularism. And you have to fit in your discourse, in your actions, in the way you practice your citizenship, etc. But I think that the challenge that we are facing is basically twofold. Number one, that it's very deceiving to think of the world as post. This sort of the end of so-and-so and the post so-and-so. I think that we live in an age where everything is present. We have the medieval coming back to the scene, ISIS as an example, very interesting sort of visual aspects and discourse, etc. And then we have also the robots. So between the two, you have very diverse sort of perspectives of religion, of politics, of social cohesion, of hegemony, etc. So we bring all these along. What is so distinct about our historical moment is that it's very ambiguous, and it brings together on the same historical platform different contradictions as well. And this is what we call complexity, basically, that it's a very complex, not complexity in the simple sense, complexity as a theory of complexity, which would lead to chaos. Chaos is not necessarily collapse of systems, but rather emergence of new systems that are unprecedented. We didn't see that formula before, so we have to look at it. Once we understand the rationale, the raison d'être, then it becomes part of the systems that we know, and it's not chaotic anymore. We give it a name. I think that this situation creates fear. And what actually religion is about in all religions, whether they are man-made or revealed, monotheistic or polytheistic, religion is about peace. Not peace in terms of war and peace, but peace in terms of al-amn, that you feel safe, secure, and certain. So safety, security, and certainty, or as Zygmunt Bauman called it, Sicherheit in the German sense, that brings together all these notions. And if we're talking about politics, what politics do we mean? And I'd rather start from below, the politics of everyday life. In such a world where the globalization is basically changing rapidly, and speed is a very important factor, changing rapidly, a lot of maps on the economic, social, and economic level, that sense of rooting yourself in a community, which has always been a necessary factor in religion, regardless of what religion we're talking about, even paganism, okay, it's changing. That you're not on solid ground. You are not rooted in a community, and hence the very important notion that was mentioned regarding compassion is very difficult to attain, because with this mobility and this sort of speed of moving around, etc., you can't root yourself, and hence all the bonds and the way you can cluster as a human being, which creates then a value system and then a practice of a specific faith in a collective way, which the religion, as we understand it in this part of the world, is about, is very difficult. What comes out of that is a religion, and we can face that in Turkey. Yani, I've been living in Turkey for almost 6 or 7 years now. So you have those who were brought up in Germany, in the Turkish sort of community in Germany. And I have students who come back in order to study in Turkey. And you can clearly see that their understanding of Islam is different from the understanding of Islam of their parents, and definitely of their grandparents to whom they are coming back to stay with. And the factor of urbanism has been neglected in our discussion of secularism and religion. We focused more on individualism. We focused more on sovereignty and the state. But the everyday life and urbanism, I think, is a very important factor, this mobility. It creates either a resistance to this speed, so you want to hold things at a specific pace, and the best thing to do is to go back, to hold to what was so constant, settled, certain, and that's it. Or you try to mix different practices. You see the person, you can't imagine that this person went to Hajj. You know, you see him as a very super modern businessman, you know, traveling, sometimes even drinking wine, you know, and then you find out that he has the other face. So this is the many faces of our modern individual that are actually sometimes seem to be from the outside contradicting, you know, but it's not. For him, it's not. It's a way of trying to cope. And how this and the practices of youth and the new formulas or the new versions of fatwa online. You know, you don't go to a sheikh and ask for fatwa in the Muftulu in Istanbul, for example, but you go online and then try to Google or find yourself a website, and then you ask a question, and Allah only knows who the person who is giving you the fatwa and whether he's qualified or not. So this sort of ambiguity in the situation, I think it affects very much the political sense of identity, but also the citizenship sense of collectivity. Because everyone is a world on his own, and more, as Michael Walzer in political theory used to say, thick and thin. You know, it doesn't have to be thick. This loyalty and identity, the way ultranationalism is presenting it, etc., populism, populist nationalism, doesn't have to be thick. But to which extent is it thin, and would it go that thin that people wouldn't have something in common? This is a political issue. At core, while it is basically observed in everyday life. How many minutes do I have?
We are over. Let's wait for the second round. Your
okay,
next part. Okay, thank you. Please join me in thanking her. I think what you brought to the attention of the audience is this concept of agency, individuals in an everyday life. Yes, the state is there as an overarching maybe structure, and the communities are there, even the scholars are there. But then at the end of the day, we have got individuals who are really on the receiving end in the process of transformation. I think almost all speakers mentioned this. There's a huge change that is taking place in the world in terms of politics, economy, and also technology today. And I think we cannot really divorce ourselves from the changes that are taking place. Now, again, we will start with the second round. In the first round, we have tried to identify some of the major issues, questions, problems, etc. in the first round. Now we will be looking at what we can do. What are the alternatives? Is there anything that we can really propose in terms of resolving this huge issue? Of course, we cannot find a solution to the age-old issue, but I think in specific conditions, in specific maybe context, we may come up with some bright ideas, because we need to have alternative discourses, alternative ways of, I think, thinking. This is the main, I think, objective of this forum, rather than just going along with the discussions that are taking place all over the world. Now, coming back to, again, Francois Bourka, who talked about France and the major issues. He talked about the hegemony. He talked about colonialism. You drew quite a pessimistic picture. Why are you so pessimistic? And if there is anything that be new and innovative in the French context, what could be the things that we can raise here? So you've got 5 minutes this time.
Thank you, Mr. President. When it comes to exposing bright ideas, I'd rather use only 3 minutes and give 2 more to my neighbors. It's not so easy to have bright ideas. A remark: when it comes to secularization, you insisted upon the theory of secularization was going into progress. I kindly disagree on the idea that everyone on the planet is moving in the same direction. Let me give you just a few examples. Well, let me wrap up my idea. I think that most of the Muslim world, most of the non-Western world is clearly moving towards some kind of secularization. But I'm not convinced that there are no tensions inside the Western societies nowadays which go in the opposite direction. Just 3, 4 examples. When I was eager to know what Jair Bolsonaro would say after his electoral defeat, I went on his Twitter account. The first expression of Jair Bolsonaro after his defeat was a Bible verse. That's all, nothing else. But a week ago in France, there was a little scandal that there was a religious program which was imposed for the first time inside the right-wing channel, C News for those who know this channel. The direction, the owner has imposed a purely religious, speaking about devil and so. And this is a little signal. Then please remember that in front of us, Israel is becoming clearly, like never before, a theocracy. And we do not oppose this trend. Neither the US nor Europe, at least, really oppose this trend. The issue of abortion in the US during the past 6 months has demonstrated the raise of the level of religious considerations into the public sphere. So I would be careful when exploring the idea of this no one-way move towards secularization in Western societies. I often tend to say to friends in the Arab world, you are moving in the good direction. We are moving backward to a certain extent. When it comes to the relation with secularization and democracy, the trend is not so good. Well, related to what I've been, the issue I've been addressing, how can we lower the tensions? I have to speak from a Western or French point of view. I say we must go further in the idea of accepting the idea that we have moved out of a situation, the comfort of a situation of hegemony. So this is the root cause we need to address. And if we look to this issue with some courage, we will probably be capable of producing the rules which will allow coexistence in our societies, which tend to be more and more multicultural and multi-religious. It's a huge challenge. Well, it is the challenge of the non-Western world as well. But this is one direction where we could concentrate our efforts. Thank you so much for your attention.
Well, thank you very much. Now, I think we can move on to Şaban Düzgün, who explored the dichotomy between the modern world and the religious worldviews. And he said that, the modernity, the ideals of modernity and ideals or the objectives of religions, they have some sort of commonality. But when you look at the practice, he said, religions are blamed. Is it because religions really fail to deliver what they promised, or it's because we understand religion in a wrong way?
Teşekkür ederim Talip Hocam. Dinin insanlığın birikimi olarak bugüne kadar gelen ne varsa, adı ister aydınlanma ister modernite olsun, onlarla ilişkisini ben şöyle tanımlıyorum: içererek aşmak. İçererek aşmak, yani onları içerecek ama aynı zamanda onları aşacak. Yani onlarla özdeş olmayacak. Bu daha büyük bir ufuk gerektiriyor. Yani Cebrail'in Hazreti Peygamber'le ilk buluşmasında ufuku âlâdan bahsediyor Kur'an-ı Kerim. En yüksek ufuk. Bu şu demek: bir dindar insanın ufku en yükseğe odaklanmalı. Yani bu insan haklarında gidilebilecek en ileri nokta, insanın onuru konusunda gidilebilecek en ileri nokta. Normal standart bir ahlak değil yani. Ahlakın daha üst bir formu. Onun için hep şöyle söylerim. Kur'an-ı Kerim ayetini tercüme ederken anlamını farklı veriyorum onun için. Ve cezâ'ü seyyiyetin seyyiyetun misluha. Size yapılan bir kötülüğe ancak ona denk bir kötülükle karşılık verebilirsiniz. Ayeti diyorum tam bir Yahudi mantığıyla yapılan tercüme. Yani adalet tercümesi. Size yapılan kötülüğe ona denk bir kötülükle karşılık verebilirsiniz. Oysa yapılması gereken tercüme Kur'an'ın ruhuna uygun bir tercüme olmalı. O da Kur'an'ın ruhu merhametle yoğruludur, adaletle değil. O da şu: size yapılan bir kötülüğe kötülükle karşılık vermeniz de kötülüktür. Çünkü iki kötülük bir iyilik yapmıyor. Dolayısıyla Kur'an'a bakarken adalet perspektifinden mi bakacağız, merhamet perspektifinden mi bakacağız derseniz, bugün dünyada eksik olan adalet değil bana sorarsanız. Çünkü bütün hukuk sistemleri adaleti gerçekleştirmeye çalışıyor. Eksik olan bana sorarsanız merhamet. Empati eksikliği, hemhal olma derdimizin olmaması. Onu bu altını çizmiştim kadın harflerle. Biz dünyaya ne önerebiliriz? Merhameti önerebiliriz. Adalet zaten şu anda öneriliyor yüzyıllardır ve geldiğimiz nokta Hegel'in tanımladığı gibi tarih mezbahası. Hegel'in kullandığı slaughter bench dediği, bugün tarih bize bir mezbahane, yani bir kesimhane, insanların kurban edildiği, kesildiği bir tarih veriyor. Bu tarihten kurtulma imkanını Hegel üzerine doktora tezi yapan Marx, insanın ikinci doğası kavramını üretiyor. Bu kavram bizde var. Ben Maturidi çalışan birisiyim. Maturidi'de de insanın ikinci doğası diye bir kavram var. Yani insana siz, ve İngilizcesi bunun imaginative realities, yani muhayyel gerçeklikler. İlk bakışta size öyle bir dünya vaat ederim ki siz dersiniz ki kardeşim bu imaginatiftir ya, bu muhayyel, hayalidir dersiniz. Sonra bu hayali birileri gerçekleştirir, bu hayal olur. Onun için Marx diyor ki öyle insanın doğasını ikinci kez öyle bir inşa edin ki kan zehirlenmesine uğrasın. Yani kan akıtmadığı zaman adam rahatsız olsun. Böyle bir insan ancak devrim yapabilir diyor. Ve adını tarihe ancak böyle yazdırabilir. Yoksa tarih o adamı unutur. Şimdi benzer bir şey ben diyorum ki Marx madem ki kan zehirlenmesinden bahsediyor, o zaman ben de merhamet zehirlenmesinden bahsedeyim. Yani insanlara dokunmadığın zaman kendini rahatsız hissedeceğim bir dindar profili verin bana. Bütün dünya bundan yararlansın ve o din var olsun. Kapitalizmi bugün var eden şey nedir? Tek bir cümleyle ben izah edebilirim. Kapitalizmin ürünlerinden yararlanıyor olmamız kapitalizmi var eden düzendir. Ne üretiyorsa yararlanıyoruz, o da devamını sağlıyor. Bir bakın lütfen. Dolayısıyla dinin varlığı yararlanmasına bağlıdır insanların ondan. Nerede eksiklik var? Birinci konu bir kısmında söylemiştim. Irkçılığı reddediyorsanız, kötülükle mücadele ediyorsanız, dini kimliği ne olursa olsun zalim addediyorsanız kötülük yapanı, bütün insanlar arkanızda olabilir. Dolayısıyla burada birincisi bizim bu altını çizdiğim imajinatif gerçeklikler, yani dinin gelecek varsayımı ultra üst standartta bir insani standart vaat etmelidir ve bunu gerçekleştirecek ikinci bir insan doğası, merhamet odaklı ikinci bir insan doğası. Bu ama şöyle bir gerçekliğimiz var, bu idealimiz. Sizinle konuşurken Talip Hocam söyledim onu, bu bir gerçek bugün. Hep biz bir postmoderniteden bahsederken akışkanlık biliyorsunuz postmodernitenin temel sloganıdır. Her şey akıyor. Bugün dinin içerisine demir atmış, sabitlenmiş cemaatler, insanlar kadar seyyal, akışkan dindarlıklar dönemi. Yani dinin içinde ve dışında, sınırda yaşıyor. Kur'an-ı Kerim'de ayet var. Allah'a böyle kıyıda köşede, tam kıyıda ibadet edenlerden bahseder. Hemen öbür tarafa gidebilir. Yani artık olmayan ile henüz gelmeyen arasında Araf'ta bir durumdan bahsedilir ya. Artık olmayan ve henüz gelmeyen arasında Araf'ta bir yerde. Bu çok fena bir durum. Dolayısıyla bu tür dindarlıklar bugün var ve bunlara ilişkin bir dil geliştirmemiz gerekiyor. Ben bugün Türkiye'de dindar suretlerin, seküler siretlerin hakim olduğu bir çağa AK Parti yönetiminde son 20 yıl içerisinde böyle bir grup ürettik biz. Elimizde ürettik. Yani dindar suretler, seküler siretler. Bu ne demek? Bunun üzerine uzunca konuşabiliriz. Son olarak burada söyleyeceğim şey, öneri olarak söyleyeceğim şey, nihayetinde hiper gerçeklik diye bir dönemde yaşıyoruz. Yani Kur'an-ı Kerim buna iltibas diyor. Yani hakikatin yanlış bir elbiseye büründürülerek pazarlanması, hiper gerçeklik, algı, imaj her şeyin önünde. Dolayısıyla bize sunulan din ile, özellikle İslam ile ilgili sunulanların bütün dünyaya bunu anlatmamız gerekiyor. İşte yanımızda bir Fransız arkadaşımız var. French İntifada diye bir kitap var. Gördünüz mü bilmiyorum. French İntifada. Yani Fransa'da aynen Filistin'de olduğu gibi bir intifadanın olacağı ve Fransızların çok fena bir şekilde zarar göreceğini yazan, propagandasını yapan bir kitap diyorum ama bu bir algı yaratma operasyonudur. Çok üzücü bir fıkra Almanya'da anlatılır. Çok sık gidip gelen birisi olarak bunu dinlemek beni üzmüştür. Almanya'da Almanlar birbirine fıkra anlatıyorlar. Bir Yahudi ve bir Müslümanın farkı nedir Almanya'da diye. Verilen cevap şu: Yahudiler dersini aldı, Müslümanlar henüz almadı. Dolayısıyla bizim gelecek projeksiyonumuzun içerisine Talip Hocam ciddi anlamda doğuda ve batıda dinin geleceği nasıl olacak, dindarlar nasıl bir yaşam içinde hayat sürecek sorusunu sorup bunu ciddi anlamda samimi bir şekilde araştırmamız gerekiyor. Çok teşekkür ediyorum.
Thank you very much. I think you gave us a very good homework as well to study. As we have said in the beginning, I think religion was with us, is with us, and will be with us in the future. So we should be prepared in terms of intellectual, I think, challenges that we will face. That brings us to Masuda again. She talked about in the first round some of the issues related to secular organizations and the conceptions of development. What would be the alternatives? Is there anything like spiritually based or religiously based idea of development, whether such a issue can be put on the table and agenda?
Yes, there is already. Thanks. There is already that attempt, even within the Western sort of development discourse. Me and, in fact, Severine, a colleague of mine, we have this book which is rewriting the secular script. And she comes from a Catholic position, I come from an Islamic position. But there are many, just an example to say there are many books out there already and efforts to say that how if you bring in the religious lens, you can have a much more humane conception of development, which also, to be honest, is now, given the environmental constraint, and all more realistic. So one thing is humane, it's more egalitarian. Islam, like religious spirits, can help you do that if you bring it in the debate. But it's also that it's more viable, given the environmental kind of resources, because the vision of development partly has to change. You cannot have this kind of a modernity and consumption and assume that the global world can move towards that. So that's one. But secondly, I'll also like to connect here to the other strand of my work, which I haven't talked about today at all, but which the book is about, which is how do you revive Islamic scholarly tradition in a way that it has the rationalist and the philosophical and those deeper sort of trends that it had in the pre-colonial Muslim world, when all these Islamic empires emerged and Islam was contributing to science when Europe was not. And this is an issue that also came up in the ethics session yesterday. Professor Ibrahim Musa is here. He was also talking about it. So how do you relate Islam to modernity? So in order to inform development debates at the global level, from an Islamic perspective, having this debate within the Muslim societies on what is, the Islamic ideals, but how do you bring them and relate to the modern time, that's a slightly different debate. And that debate has to happen, and that's where this book I wanted to, I sort of brought it along, because here in this project we looked at Al-Azhar, scholarly tradition of Al-Azhar, we looked at, which is like the classical tradition, we look at Saudi Salafism from Saudi Arabia, which has been globally influential. South Asian tradition, we picked Deoband, which is again from the Hanafi tradition, but very orthodox and textual. And third, and fourthly, the main reason I mention it, that we look at Diyanat. And normally people don't look at Diyanat in the Western scholarship as an Islamic authority, because Turkey was too secular, and Diyanat was built by Kemalist regime, so it's too secular. Why look at it? But by the time I was leading this research program, we started it in 2010 and 11, Diyanat was clearly becoming quite important globally, and also especially in Europe because of the Turkish population. And interestingly, in this volume, what we are arguing, and it's very objective research, we are arguing is that Turkey and Diyanat right now are the most promising places for having that kind of debate on Islam and modernity, which young Muslims can relate to. In my own fieldwork in Istanbul, because I keep coming to Turkey a lot for my fieldwork, I found so many British or French and other young Muslims, second, third generation Muslims, who want to learn Islam in Turkey, because they're finding the right kind of mix of modernity and Islamic tradition, scholarly tradition. And the promising point, and I think we don't have much time, so I want to make this point. What is promising about Diyanat, especially 2015 and 16 period, when we were here and doing fieldwork, is this, that under the AKP, Diyanat was opening up to absorbing multiple Islamic strands. So we were able to see that multiple Sufi tariqas and all, or even scholars, were being brought in to discuss and debate. The problem becomes when an Islamic, any kind of Islamic political force tries to impose their vision of Islam, because then there is enforcement of one vision. While Islam is a very pluralistic tradition, there are many voices within it. So what we found promising about Diyanat was that it was bringing those multiple voices within it, and that I thought was, we argue, is very promising. And also, like Istanbul gives you just the right balance of modernity and religiosity. So I do think that Turkey is in quite a good place to take a leadership, and I'll finish with this, this idea that we need, like I said, a research institute, a strong one, and this is not about religion now, this is more about development again, which takes on modern development issues, whether it's again to go back to gender, to economy, to environment, to all these modern concerns that we say, but we can't, where the research is done slightly from an Islamic Muslim cultural perspective, which can counter the research that comes out from the World Bank and these kind of development institutions. You cannot replace those institutions immediately, but you can start to counter their vision of development by having a strong multilateral kind of Muslim-funded research institution, but very rigorous one. And this is social science research, not Islamic research. Do you understand? The ideas have to be from Islamic spirit, but research has to be rigorous, because only then you can counter the discourse coming from World Bank and all these institutions.
Thank you very much. Now again, back to Bünyamin Hoca. Bünyamin Hoca talked about modernity and how it has really influenced religion, but he did not mention specifically what religion or which region that modernity really influenced religion. I wonder what he thinks about the Muslim world, whether Muslim world is also influenced by the same processes in the same way, or there is a resistance to the onslaught of modernity in the Muslim world. Maybe you can also specifically refer to Turkey. It's up to you. Thank you. So you have got 5 minutes.
Evet, çok teşekkür ederim. Aslında ilk konuşmamda çok üzerinden geçtim. Neredeyse başlıkları böyle tek tek sıraladım. Aslında şimdi, ne diyorum? Aslında ne demek istiyorum? Bunu biraz açmaya çalışayım. Tabii Türkiye'nin modernleşme süreci ve dinle ilişkisi çok daha spesifik bir konu ama Türkiye'de dünyanın dışında bir yerde yer almıyor. Aslında dünyadaki bütün dönüşümler ve değişimlerle bir şekilde paralel bir bağlam geliştirmiş durumda. Yani şunu kabul etmek lazım. Yani dini hala ayakta tutan en önemli şey aslında dinin ölümü karşılama bağlamında yarattığı umudun yerine koyabilecek başka bir umudun henüz daha gerçekleşmemiş olması. Bu transhümanizmde olur mu olmaz mı onu bilmiyoruz ama en nihayetinde ölümü karşılayan, ölüme karşı en temel cevabı veren hala dinler. Hangi din olursa olsun bir şekilde veriyor. Şimdi bu açıdan baktığımız zaman evet biz de 60'lı yıllardan beri dinlerin tekrar ayakta kaldığını, hatta işte geri geldiğini söylüyoruz. Şimdi geri geldiğini söylediğimiz zaman aslında 90'lı yıllarda yani dinleri bir kimlik olarak karşıladık ve bir kimlik olarak bir şekilde demokrasinin içine yedirmeye çalıştık. Ve demokrasi içinde, o demokrasinin çoğulculuğu içinde bir yerde olmaları gerektiğini falan düşündük. Ama 2000'lerden sonra asıl sorun şu oldu. İyi güzel de dini nasıl bir şekilde demokrasiye yedireceksiniz? İşte dini nasıl demokrasiye yedireceksiniz sorusunu aslında postsekülerler biraz cevaplamaya çalıştı. Onlar bir tanesi Habermas'tı. Habermas dedi ki evet yani dini de bir şekilde aslında biz kendi demokratik söylemimiz içine ki o demokratik söylem temelde aslında iletişimsel rasyonelite üzerine kurulu bir müzakereden bahsediyordu. Buna koyabiliriz ve din de aslında müzakerenin parçalarından bir tanesi olur. Ama burada sorun şu, bu müzakere sonunda aslında yani bu müzakeredeki temel erek aslında aydınlanmacı rasyoneliteye dayanıyor. Mesela az önce söyledim, sünnet mesela çocuk sünnetinden bahsediyorum. Almanya'da sıkça tartışıldı. Dediler ki basit yaralama suçu olsun. Yani işte doktoru içinde, işte yapan ebeveynin içinde. Neden? Çünkü Batı rasyonel aklı bunu almak istemiyor. Şöyle düşünüyor, diyor ki aslında reşit olmayan bir çocuk hakkında siz büyükler karar veriyorsunuz. Siz büyükler karar veriyorsanız reşit olmayan bir çocuğun bir şekilde eksikliği ya da fazlalığı hakkında bunu yapamazsınız. Yani şuna mesela evet diyebilir. Yani 18 yaşından sonra çocuk kendi sünnet olup olmadığına kendisi karar versin. Tabii bu bizim Müslümanlar için bayağı komik bir sonuç da olsa ama buna bir şekilde izin verebilir konumda olmasına rağmen diğeri mesela geçmiyor. O Batı rasyonelitesinden geçmiyor. O süzgeçten bir şekilde geçmiyor aslında. Orada bir sıkıntı var. Yani ama nihayetinde böyle bir konsept de var. Kıta Avrupası temelde aslında bu konsepti bir nevi aslında öncelik tartışmalarının ve alan tartışmalarının bir aşılması olarak görüyor ve demokratik bir konsept olarak görüyor. Ve hala da aslında mesela bizde belki daha çok sol Kemalist çizginin şimdi geldiği konumu daha çok aslında sembolize ediyor bu. Bir başka konsepte işte Anglo-Saksonların aslında geliştirdiği, temelinde aslında bu mezhep kavgasına kadar dayanan, yani din ve dini olmayanlar arasında veya dinler arasında bir nevi çoğulculuk güden bir anlayış tarzı. Yani dini seçeneklerden bir seçenek yapıyorsunuz ama seçeneklerden seçenek yaptığınız zaman aslında dinin bir nevi cihan şumurluk iddiasını da patolojik hale getiriyorsunuz. Bu nerede mesela? Bunu nerede test ediyorsunuz? Şimdi toplumsal cinsiyet ya da cinsel tercihler bağlamında karşılaştığı zaman Katolikler de, Müslümanlar da burada diyorlar ki ya burada duralım. Yani bunu tekrar bir düşünelim. Ama bir taraftan da bakarsak dinin çok bireyselleştiğini görüyoruz ki İslamcılar içinde de aynı şekilde bireyselleşme çok ciddi bir şekilde gerçekleşmiş durumda. Yani evet İslamcıların da işte davası hala dava ama çok bireysel bir dava. Üstlerinde herhangi bir otorite tanımayan bir dava. Bir taraftan da baktığımız zaman ama İslamcılığın o davasını kaybettiği muhafazakarlaşma hatta düşmanını kaybettiği bir liberalleşme döneminde tamamen bireysellikten bahsettiğimiz bir dönemde yani hem dini olanı Hibe Hanım söyledi hem dini olanı hem de dini olmayanı aynı anda yaşadığımız aynı gündelik hayatta yaşadığımız bir dönemde Aslına bakarsanız bu seçenek olması mesela diyelim ki daha çok bizde genç nesil için daha cazip bir hal alıyor. Yani bu açıdan baktığımızda yani Türkiye'de de gençler temelde aslında dinin bu kadar bir yerde kalmasını istiyorlar. Seçeneklerden bir seçenek olmasını istiyorlar. Hayatını sadece bir kısmına, o da istedikleri zaman doldursun istiyorlar bir anlamda. Ama bir taraftan da dünyada çok ciddi bir yapısal dönüşüm var. Yani daha çok böyle yani bu dünyadaki siyaset dengesinin değişimiyle alakalı bir şey. Yani evet o neoliberal çağın işte her ne kadar bir sürü olumsuzluklarına rağmen aslında işte toplumu ve piyasayı öncelemesiyle birlikte özgürlükler alanının geliştirdiği bağlam artık ciddi bir şekilde geride kaldı. Özellikle 2008 ekonomik krizi, sonra pandemi, Türkiye'nin hatta Türkiye'ye özgü başka krizler ve geldiğimiz noktada aslında yükselen değer evet siyasetin iradesi, kararı, devlet, devletin bir şekilde hemen ekonomiye, topluma, hemen her tarafa egemen olması meselesi. Şimdi burada da işte az önce yine bahsedildi, işte Bolsonaro'da da aynı şeyi görüyoruz, Polonya'da da aynı şeyi görüyoruz. Politik teolojik bir geri geliş var. Bu politik teolojik geri geliş de yani şöyle düşünmeyin. Yani dinin din olarak geri geldiğini söylemiyorum. İşte seküler dindarlık dediğim şey aslında tam böyle bir şey. Yani temelde aslında geri gelen şey hani köklere çok fazla atıf yapmayan ama bir şekilde geleceği inşa eden. O yüzden çok teknolojist, çok modernist bir taraftan ama bir taraftan da antiliberal. Yani antiliberal ama modernist ve teknolojist bir bağlam ciddi bir şekilde geri gelmiş durumda. Ve bu geri gelen şey aslında devletin hani bir nevi aslında din üzerinde de söz sahibi olması gerektiğini, dini kollayan ama söz sahibi olmak, son kararı veren ama dinin de bir şekilde aslında devleti güçlendirdiği bir bağlam olarak düşünülüyor ki yani bu bizim tarihsel konseptimize de uyar gibi görünüyor bu dini devlet bağlamında ama o dini devletten de çok farklı bir şey, çok daha seküler bir şey. Seküler bir dini devlet diyelim. Bitireyim.
Thank you very much, Bünyamin Hoca. Now, I think we are coming towards the end of our panel, the last two speakers. Thank you very much for your patience and also the patience of the speakers as well. Kemaluddin, you have referred to fundamental changes that are taking place in the world. And as a result of those changes, multicultural, multi-faith societies are now becoming more and more, I think, visible, I would say. Now we have got, I think, certain actors quite powerful, like the state, the market. And what will be the role of religion and what religion can offer really, along with the state and the market in terms of politics, religion, society, and also the peace, equality, etc.
Okay, thanks for your question, Professor Talib. I realize that we are already out of time. I'll be very brief with my answer. I already mentioned just now, for example, that the role what religion can bring to society and the function of religion in society and how religion can lead to transformative changes in society. So I believe that what we should move and what we should work towards today is to reduce the social inequality in the world in terms of the for example, the plurality that we see. Right? In societies today, we say that there are diverse groups that we find. We live in multicultural societies. There are different people with different ideas and so on. So I'm attracted to what my colleagues say just now a lot about compassion, about empathy, and even in the sociological tradition, we have this like a tradition from Max Weber talking about Westerhön and empathetic understanding and how we need to seek empathy and we need to seek understanding about different groups, right? So this famous dictum of you don't have to be Caesar to know Caesar, right? Anyone can understand another person if you put yourself in that other person's shoes. But what is even better is to actually to speak to that person, to bridge that gap. So what is important, I feel, in my book, I talk about this book, when I talk about young Muslims, the September 11 generation, this idea of representing Islam. Right? So I think that representation is very important. So when I talk about this whole idea of representation, representing Islam, how young Muslims also want to represent Islam. right? Not just the religious authorities. So you see, for example, I study hip-hop culture, for example, musicians who you do not see traditionally or conventionally as speakers for our community. But they are harnessing this culture in order to fight Islamophobia, right? To front their social activism, to speak truth to power, and so on and so forth. So I think that what is important is for us to have representation and to understand. Like, I think that a lot of people are very tired of labels, right, being thrown about even amongst the Muslim community. I think that when we don't understand and we don't have representation, we resort to labeling. And this is what Professor kind of like Mahmoud Mamdani in Colombia called good Muslims, bad Muslims, kind of like an idea. So when we do not understand, we do not speak to others, we resort to lazy kind of stereotyping in order that confirms our biases and prejudices. So I think that in order to survive in this multipolar, diverse society that we live in today, we cannot escape but have representation from the groups that we mentioned. That when we want to talk about women, women's voices must be heard. When we want to talk about the youth, we must involve the youth in our discussions. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Kemaluddin. Thank you for your intervention. And I would like to thank Hiba for your patience, first of all, because you are the last. Maybe you are the most tired one. Now, let me turn to you. Maybe you've got a number of things in your computer, but I want to ask you about your experience in Turkey, because you referred to your time that you spent and some of the students that you have had in your classes. You know, AK Party has gone through almost 20 years in Turkey, and the state-religion relations have really changed. We have seen, to a large degree, normalization of secularization. If we refer secularization as some sort of a space where religion and state organizations can take place on a more just, more libertarian way. We had a French style of secularization where religion has been mostly kept out of the public space in Turkey. You know, these veiling issues, headscarf issues, and people with beard. Now, all of those things are resolved to a large extent. But when AK Party came to power, as you have just mentioned in the beginning, there were a lot of worries that, you know, AK Party will change Turkey into the Islamic direction, Sharia might come, etc., and Turkey will move away from the European Union perspectives. What is your experience of Turkey, and whether that experience can tell something to the world outside? In 5 minutes, please.
Okay, Assalamu alaikum. I will start with a joke. I was about to talk about language. So this is how my name is written in Turkish. They Turkicized my name. So it's written H-E-B-A and then Ezad E-Z-Z-A-T. So they made it a Turkish version. So it's very interesting. Language, you know, the language of everyday life, not only in terms of tongue, but the language meaning the culture. And I think that Turkey is presenting a very interesting example because it has a very unique history. Secularization in Turkey is different fairly from other countries. The only example I can think of is Tunisia. And in the Arab world, there are some similarities in the policies, specifically during the decades before the 50s in Turkey. So, and yet there are different interpretations of that history. They say, well, though there was like discrimination against some groups in society in order to impose secularism, but at the end of the day, this was not an anti-religious policy. It just wanted to control the different spaces, etc., though at a very high price. So it's interesting how what is amazing for me is how society can take its time to rethink about what happened. And at one point, if you were in the 40s, you wouldn't have at all anticipated what happened in 2010, for example. You know, so the amazing thing is how culture matters and how religion will not fade away. I mean, it keeps coming back in different ways through different generations at specific junctures in society. So this is one of the lessons from the Turkish case. But also the difference in Turkey from other countries, and it's not about whether there is this X or Y, because, for example, in Egypt, we have strong Sufi tariqas, but Sufism is different in Turkey, and I think it's one of the important elements in keeping civic virtues, but also adab. you know, and I think this is the layer of akhlaq, the layer of manners in the society is very strong. And it's very, I mean, it deserves respect here. It's very respectable. Something that even if you secularize from the religious perspective, but religion also is about manners. Manners are very strong even amongst the different secular, quote unquote, because I talked about urbanism, secular neighborhoods, because the city is also divided somehow. Turkey has got a different, interesting urban design. What I wanted to finish with is actually part of globalization that is very important that we sometimes overlook. We talk about the confrontation between religion and the state. Sometimes we talk about social movements, so we go more sociological. But I think that how the economic system affects secularization is very important and also affects the way people think about religion. And it's not about the other side. It's about the control from the outside, as if there is a homogeneous understanding of religion. But it's interesting how it penetrates. I mean, different conceptual systems overlap. And I will mention just 2 points so that I wouldn't take too much time. The first thing is the nature of the spectacle, that religions have been going more and more spectacular, even if they are not political. If they are political, so you bring your supporters to the streets, you make big demonstrations or massive marches, etc. But even the secularized versions, they are also spectacular. The government is okay with huge Sufi celebrations in Egypt that sometimes are visited. I mean, the Mawlid, when we have celebrating a Mawlid, not the Mawlid of the Prophet, the Mawlid of different Ahlul Bayt, Al-Hussein, Sayyidah Zainab, Hazrat Hussein, etc. 3 million people are in the area. The area is completely closed, completely secured, etc. So the spectacular is something that somehow comes and goes with manifestation, but also a degree of showing off and secularization. The last point is marketing religion. How religion is affected by a society where marketing is very much in demand, and at the same time how it affects the degree of piety within the religious individual practice that sometimes is wasted with that.
Well, thank you very much. Please join me in thanking our panelists. Now we come to the end of our panel on the role of religion in politics and society, and I think we have covered broad range of topics, and now we have got a lot to digest and also some homework to do. Maybe the next forum, I don't know when it will take place, maybe next year, so we can discuss in more detail some of the issues that you have just mentioned. I'd like to thank everyone who participated in this panel, including our translators, of course. Thank you.